I promise you. I'm innocent on this. But I understand the caveats.
Hello, you are watching Channel World Seed. I'm Jean Paul Judson, and today we will be talking about ISPM45 third-party authorization, ISPM being the international standards for phytosanitary measures. To discuss this topic, I'm joined by Rose Souza Richards, Seed Health Manager at the ISF Secretariat, and Mary Ann Sayoc. She is the Public Affairs Lead at East West Seed. Welcome to the two of you.
Thank you.
Thank
So
you.
before we go into the details of the topic, can you just give us the top line view as to why this issue is important for the seed sector?
Well, it's very important because as we face the challenge will increase, the bottlenecks will increase if we don't take much more clear approach and direction on this specific international standard.
Okay, so challenges and bottlenecks on their way. If we're not careful and we're not doing something. Mary Ann, why is this topic important?
Yeah, for a seed company that moves seeds all across the globe, we need a more efficient way of facilitating this movement of seeds to make them available to farmers.
Okay, so we need to make seed available. We need to allow seed to move around the world. How is ISPM 45 going to help us achieve that?
Well, this is a very important ISPM that it was adopted by the Convention of Phytosanitary Measures in 2022. This is specifically international standard provide guidelines for all the different NPPOs how to authorize a third party to be able to do specific phytosanitary measures or phytosanitary activities actually on behalf of the NPPO. That means seed health testing, monitoring, surveillance, and including field inspection on the field. So this is very important because sometimes the difficulties with the NPPOs is that they are overstretched, they don't have enough resources, and that means financial, but also in personnel. So to have this ability to provide a third party to do these activities, that will facilitate all these different activities being done in a timely manner, and of course help the seed companies because they can provide the input, but also to help moving the seeds as fast as possible because, as you know, precision, timing on the planting is very important.
And so how is this going to impact the seed sector moving forward?
It will impact positively in a way that will foster more cooperation and collaboration between the private sector and the public sector as well, but also we'll have this sense that both we're trying to achieve the same thing. By having the seed sectors to be, because they already have resources, that will be able to help to be able to have everything done on the precise time. And of course, the seed sector have a lot of abilities and capabilities, including on technical staff, that will be able to provide the support for the public sector.
And will the private seed sector need to invest in certain types of infrastructure or certain types of measures that they need to start planning now?
Some of the seed companies already have that, so they'll be happy to share the resources to be able to provide the support for the NPPO. Perhaps some small companies, but some of the biggest companies or medium-sized companies, they already have a structure in place, so it wouldn't be too much of a change for them.
So in terms of this implementation,
Yep.
what are the impacts then for the seed industry? How do you see that, Mary Ann?
Yeah, maybe let me just relate to you like what was it before we had this lab accreditation. So we would every time there is a seed coming in, we would ask our NPPO to come and visit the you know the and put and make use of the post-entry quarantine facility. They would come very often, and also if they don't have the facility for testing, we would do the testing through third party, and these are usually very costly, and the results take a lot of it takes a long time to release the results. So that was the so of course the movement of seeds was quite not as sufficient, but when we had this lab accreditation, actually we had a temporary authorization only for like in 2015. So we tried it out. We reached out to our NPPO. That was we were the first private seed company to do it. We showed them the facilities, the seed health testing facilities, and our willingness to put up the greenhouses for the post-entry quarantine, and said, okay, let's give it a try. So we did it for 3 years, and we did joint testing of the seed health protocols, but all according to the ISHI, to the ISF, the standards, international standards, and it went very well. Also joint phytosanitary field inspections, and we gained the trust of NPPO and vice versa. So for them, it was really very beneficial because they would, as Rose said, they lack resources. So then we could share, some of the cost with them.
And can you explain then this relationship that you're developing with the NPPOs? I mean, particularly then in the Philippines where you're active, you might also have some other examples in that region.
Yeah. So in the Philippines, we have a very good relationship with the NPPO. We have a regular dialogue with them on issues that are arising, especially new developments in the phytosanitary requirements. But also in Thailand also is a good example. Just last year, the Ministry of Agriculture released a new law, a new regulation that they would also accredit private seed laboratories, private testing laboratories, so the rest of the seed sector could avail of this and could issue phytosanitary certificates based on the seed test results of these private laboratories.
Okay, so these are developments, and these developments will be enhanced even more now with this ISPM45 third-party authorization. What are some of the challenges that you expect then moving forward with this implementation?
Well, it's always a challenge when you're trying to interact with NPPOs and they still don't have that element of confidence or that element of trust. And then this is probably one of the biggest challenges that we found. But I'm very happy to mention about the SCDF project that ISF is involved, together with APSA and APARI as well, and CropLife Asia, where we are having engagements with 7 different countries. Philippines is one of them, where we would like to have this ISPM implemented, but also to create that private-public relationship, partnership. So this is very great that we have the support from the SCDF, and it's very nice to see that we can do this. So this is how we intend to be able to start to break the challenges, by having the communication with the different NPPOs, by explaining the benefit that it is not only for the seed sector, but also for the governments. And then hopefully we can start to build this confidence between both parties, and we can move forward. Because this type of structure is already implemented in some countries. There is the cases that Mary Ann has already mentioned, but there is the case as well of the New Zealand as well, which they also have this collaboration where there is a third party that does not only the seed health testing, but they also do the monitor through the field inspection. So it is already a tried and successful recipe, which I'm hoping that we can bring this to other countries.
Now you're talking about the challenges of implementation, but I would assume there may have also been challenges in getting to the ISPM 45.
Absolutely.
That might also help us understand some of the challenges in the implementation. Can you give us a sense of that pathway that led to ISPM 45?
It was a very tortuous pathway. It took many years to be able to come to the conclusion, because there is a lot of NPPOs that it was very cautious and very worried that what that means. Would that mean that they would completely surrender all their roles and responsibility to the seed sector? And I can tell you that is not the case at all. There is no part of the seed sector who wants to take over the roles and responsibilities of the NPPO. These are very well defined, including on this ISPM is very well defined, the roles and responsibility. And there is a follow-up ISPM, which is ISPM 47, that already gives all the idea how the audits can be done. So actually, there is only the idea behind is only to support, to be able to help, so seeds can be moving from one country to the next in a speedy way, but not necessary to take over anything. So the challenge it took a long period of time to be able to arrive to that discussion, but finally it was adopted last year in 2022, but the discussions precede at least 5 or 6 years before.
So Mary Ann, you describe a situation where this cooperation seems to work quite well. What are the conditions for that successful cooperation, according to you, between the public authorities and the private sector?
Yeah. Well, of course, complying with the facilities for seed health testing has to be the international standards. But Rose mentioned also audit. Audit is very important. So the NPPO conducts an annual audit on the laboratory, and also phytosanitary field inspection, and also the joint validation of the testing protocols, very important. So for the NPPO, they appreciate also this knowledge sharing, information sharing.
Okay, and in terms of the international scene, because we heard from that region in Southeast Asia, but do you see differences in this level of cooperation, this level of trust across the world? Can you comment on that? Are there certain regions that will require maybe specific attention, or that will have a specific challenge?
I think so. I think there is a different way that the private sector is perceived on different governments. And there is some governments where there is really a very close interaction. There is a communication already. Philippines is a great case. New Zealand is another great case of a collaboration and discussion together. But I think that there is some other ones where there isn't that trust is still is not there, that communication is not clear enough, and there isn't that relationship yet. So that will be the ones that will need a lot of conversation, because first, we need to foster that collaboration first, that sense that we can sit down and discuss about all the different issues, and then slowly we can start to address. One thing that is important is that we wanted to have these international standards as much implemented as there is also for the NPPOs. They are developed with the purpose of harmonize and standardize how the phytosanitary requirements are implemented across the world. So it is of our interest to have this fully correctly implemented, so to have a clarity. So for us, I can see that the challenge, I wouldn't say particular regions, I think it goes more in different countries. There is a perception, how is it done? So there is quite a lot of work if we cut across the international sphere.
And also then between companies, I mean, I would assume that for a smaller company, taking on this kind of role will be a lot more challenging potentially than for a larger company that might have more resources. Do you see that as equitable as well, moving forwards between companies, or will that be a challenge for some of the smaller ones?
Yeah, it would be a challenge for the smaller ones, but I think it's doable. It can be done with maybe pooling also resources and sharing, sharing the resources. I think it could be done.
Okay, but that would also then require trust between companies.
Exactly. Yeah.
And are there any examples of that happening?
For now, no. But for now, the accreditation is on individual seed companies, but I could foresee something, of that scheme in the future.
Is that something that could be facilitated on an international level, or is ISF looking at elements that could help smaller companies also perform this kind of control?
I think that's something that we can take this on board and think. At the moment, we're thinking about a lot of advocacy and making this ISPM being well known and being well understood, and that was something that we can take and go together with it. I think it is interesting that there is all these standards, and so small companies can start to say, okay, there is an opportunity for me, and so why not invest to be able to have his own seed health lab, so he can do all the international, all the different tests that needs to be. It is important that the international validated test is the ones that we're looking for. But another thing as well, the third party does not necessarily mean just a seed company. It can be a lab, an independent lab. We can also, which is the case that we have for Thailand, there is a company, but there is also an independent lab, and this lab can do for multiple companies. So that would be an issue that wouldn't exist anymore, because it will have already be, it would not have a conflict of interest on that.
And do the NPPOs have the same level of concern when a lab is carrying out these controls versus a private seed sector company? Is there a difference, or in principle is the NPPO concerned that it is basically authorizing a third party to carry out its own controls?
I think it has both. I think it depends of the NPPO. Some will be the concern that if it is a seed company or if it is an independent lab, but also there'll be a concern is, am I handed over my role to a completely different party? And this is why this standard was so important to have been developed, and of course it took some time to be able to be developed, because actually it was to say, okay, you can do all the checks and balances here. So the auditing is important, but to be able to give this level of confidence to the NPPO that everything is performing the way that it should be. And so the NPPO will have that oversight and ultimately will make the decision which companies or which labs would be able to have this. So it still sits with them very much, the responsibility and the oversight of everything.
So in terms of the resources that the NPPOs are using to carry out these controls, I would suppose they will need less resources moving forward, because they're more in control of the general framework and the auditing. Is this generally welcomed by NPPOs?
Yeah, especially for developing countries, the NPPOs always get very little financial support or budgetary support from the government. So they're not able to do, their job as much as they want it, at a good level. So they really welcome this public-private cooperation, this collaboration, because then they do not have to do a lot of capital investment on the quarantine facilities, greenhouses, and even in the laboratory equipment.
Okay. And this ISPM45, is it applying specifically to the notion of third-party authorization? Or is it detailing the way this authorization is to be carried out and the kind of controls that need to be performed and the way it needs to be done and implemented? Is it very specific for the companies that will need to be doing this, or is it just on the principle of the authorization?
It's on the principle, and it's very much guided for the NPPOs and how they should do this. It's a set of guidance and does describe the roles and responsibility, including the audits, but really it is not to the level of detail, because that means that each country will have its own way of implementing, and this is important because actually the ISPMs are developing as international guidelines, and because each country has its own sovereignty to decide how that is going to be doing. So I assume that there is a little bit of difference from how the Philippines is doing, how Thailand is doing, how New Zealand is doing, but it doesn't mean that they have fallen away from the principle that is already set up on this specific standard. And the principle is that it can have this cooperation, and then another party, not necessarily the NPO, need to do everything, but is still maintaining the integrity that the NPPO is still responsible for the oversight.
Okay, so the same company operating in different markets or moving seed in different markets will be able to perform its own tests, but still according to the very specific requirements of each market. So it's not a total simplification, is that correct?
Yeah, exactly.
And so do you already see those differences between, say, Philippines,
right.
Thailand?
Right.
And is that difficult?
So far, no, we have not experienced any major challenges. I think it's important, especially for the during the audit, that they discuss, maybe there are some deficiencies, but very minor, and then both the company, the private laboratory, and the NPPO work together to be able to resolve this deficiency.
And
it's important to point it out that the seed companies are already doing the work to be able to meet all the different import requirements. The difference now is that instead of sitting down waiting for a test that will take 15 days, sometimes a month, because there is only one lab in the whole country, they can already do this, and then they can speed up the process of exporting.
Right.
Okay, and they can present the results,
And then the NPPO can approve or not. But of course, based on all the checks and balances that the NPPO has already put in place.
Yeah. So
Okay.
it really lessens the time. It's very more efficient this way.
Okay, so we're removing essentially a major administrative hurdle. We're also allowing NPPOs to use their resources more wisely in the more general control of the system, as opposed to every single test that needs to be performed. So if we're looking forwards with this implementation, what are some of the objectives that you feel you'll be able to attain then as private seed sector with this?
I think that the first objective is create the bond, create the cooperation between the public and the private sector, to be able to have this authorization performed, and together with all the other works that it comes under the phytosanitary arena, is that they create that trust, that it can be done. Again, we're not saying trust blindly, I'm saying trust with all the checks and balances in place. We wanted to have just this conversation, to sit down together and have this cooperation together. We're not saying don't do anything, no, we say, yes, we can provide this help, we can provide the extra resource that at the moment is lacking, but we can do this in a very friendly way, that it can be moving some of the roadblocks, and then we can continue providing seeds at a timely manner for the farmer.
Okay. And for you, Mary Ann, what are some of your objectives then on this implementation moving forward in your region or beyond?
Yeah, we would like to see this authorization. I told you that before we only had a temporary authorization or accreditation, but in 2021 they granted us a full authorization with no deadline, no expiration. So we would like to continue that very good cooperation, and we hope to share our experience with the other countries in the region, especially in the SCDF countries like Cambodia, Bangladesh, Nepal. Vietnam. We would like to share the experience of the Philippines. And hopefully, we get this ISPM45 implementation in these countries.
And this is very important because Philippines and Thailand can act as mentors across the region. So we don't necessarily need to go to every single country, but actually we're having this already countries which has already adopted and have seen the benefits. They can act as mentors for the other countries, for the region, which means that they can bring this harmonization of how they are treating this ISPM, which means that they facilitate that cooperation just by looking at the positive experiences.
We've heard in some of the discussions here at the World Seed Congress in Cape Town that in some countries there's a very strong public breeding sector, and therefore not a very strong private seed sector operating locally. Does that create an impact when we're talking about trust between public authorities and the private seed sector? The fact that some countries will not have a very strong local private seed sector, does that affect the dynamics at all?
I assume it will be, but hopefully that is something that slowly we are already moving to many different countries. I don't think you can maintain just on the public way. As we know now, to be able to move seeds, especially vegetable seeds, it's difficult to done only from inside of your country. The genetics, the material will need to come from different, especially when we're facing things like climate change. So I would say that, maybe if even in some countries there is a very strong input from the public sector, I think the discussions with this and encouraging to have a diverse private sector together with the public sector inside of these countries, I think that will be very important.
Yeah. What's your perspective? Because you mentioned some of those countries. I mean, I don't know them in detail, but I would imagine there might not be such a strong local private seed sector.
I think for field crops, cereals, there is a very strong public sector in breeding. But for vegetable seeds, it's really still made with the private seed companies. So, but I think moving the breeding materials, germplasm, for these private seed companies is very important. So this ISPM45 would also help facilitate move these breeding materials, germplasm, from one breeding company to another, and even to gene banks, because we are also supporting gene banks, getting resources from them, or we also provide. So it would really facilitate this.
Yeah, that's an important point, because it's not just about the commercial movement
No.
of seed. There are other reasons why seed moves
Exactly.
around, but the controls and the checks still need to be performed.
Absolutely. And when it comes to the genetic resource, what Mary Ann said is absolutely right. You know, we wanted to be able to move all this genetic resource across the different, to be able to challenge, to be able to move issues like the climate change, what we can do about this. So I think that it's very important to take into consideration that having this kind of ISPM implemented and implemented correctly can facilitate the movement of germplasm, can facilitate the movement of small lots of seeds which coming for breeding for the different companies, for the different countries in the world.
So we've talked about this issue of trust. We talked about the fact that ISPM45 is a starting point for this trust to be built. We're on Channel World Seed. We're speaking to the seed sector around the world. I would imagine that they will also need to take this up very much.
Yes.
It's not necessarily just going to happen. You know, it's a standard that needs to be used. So what is your message to the seed sector out there listening to this session on taking up this third-party authorization?
Well, be engaged, be part of the conversation, talk to your NPPO, show, read, and have discussions with them, because the reality is everything can start with a simple conversation. And I think this is how you can start building the trust and build the confidence. So I think for all of us, all the companies on the sector now, take a look on this ISPM and have a conversation with your NPPO, and of course be part of some of the working groups that we have in ISF, and we are bringing this discussion at the international level.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you, Rose. And Mary Ann, your message to the seed sector.
Yeah, the public-private collaboration is very important. We need to get the trust from the NPPO, but as somebody said, we should not, we are not taking over their jobs, but we are supporting them in doing their jobs better.
Okay, and so now it's just a question of implementing this measure. So I hope you learned a little bit more about the framework of ISPM 45, and you know a little bit more about what you need to do and what's coming up for you to perform controls and checks on behalf of the NPPOs to facilitate the movement of seed and remove some of those administrative hurdles that have existed so far. Thank you very much, Rose. Thank you also, Mary Ann, for having shared your insights with us this morning. And take care and see you next time.